The sound wasn't a knock. It wasn't a doorbell. It wasn't even the casual jiggle of a curious neighbor. It was the hard, metallic twist of my deadbolt. A stranger's key was in my lock. For a second, my brain refused to process it. That sharp scrape, pins inside the mechanism shifting under deliberate pressure, made every hair on my arms rise. Someone wasn't just outside my house. They were inside my front door. And the confidence in that motion told me something worse. Whoever it was believed they had every right to be there. My heart jackhammered against my ribs. I lurched upright in bed, the shadows of dawn still bleeding through the blinds. And then I heard her voice, smooth, syrupy, commanding. The kind of voice that didn't ask permission. "Don't worry," she said. "I have the master key. HOA policy grants me full access." Karen Blake, president of the Homeowners Association, queen of the cul-de-sac, dictator of suburbia. My stomach plummeted. Hearing a stranger claim they could walk into your home at 6 in the morning, your home, the one you pay for, the one place meant to be safe, is the kind of terror caffeine could never erase. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't paranoia. This was trespass wrapped in authority. The key scraped again, metal grinding against metal, and that sound sliced deeper than any scream. I threw off the sheets, feet hitting cold tile. Sarah, my wife, still lay curled under the blanket, oblivious. Lucky. She could sleep through a hurricane if the storm kept its voice down. Me? I was already shaking, the kind of tremor where adrenaline burns through every nerve. The knob rattled. My deadbolt shifted half a turn. I sprinted barefoot, nearly tripping on the rug, and slammed the chain lock across the frame just as the knob jerked again. "Karen!" My voice cracked, raw from the sudden surge of fear. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Through the door came her reply, sing-song, practiced, like she was reading from a script she'd written 100 times before. Emergency inspection. Possible mold situation. Immediate access required. Mold. At 6 a.m. on a Saturday. I wanted to laugh, but the anger burned too hot for humor. "Back away from my door," I snapped, forcing steel into my voice even as my pulse roared in my ears. "This is my house, not your playground." Karen chuckled, an ugly, patronizing sound. "Oh, Mark," she said, like I was a child mid-tantrum. "You signed the HOA agreement, Section 3B. I don't need your permission." Then it happened. The lock clicked. A half-turn. Not enough to open, thank God for the chain, but enough to tell me she wasn't bluffing. She really did have a master key. Adrenaline sharpened the world into brutal clarity. I noticed everything. The faint buzz of my neighbor's sprinkler, the flicker of the hallway bulb above me, the sour stench of yesterday's coffee grounds still in the trash. And behind it all, the thunder of my pulse, a war drum echoing through my skull. This wasn't an overzealous HOA president anymore. This was an intruder with a key, a threat 2 inches from my living room. And in that instant, something cold settled over me. I decided this story wasn't ending with me as her victim. I pressed my forehead to the wood, my voice low and dangerous. "You step 1 more inch inside, Karen, and you'll regret it." Silence. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd leave. Then I caught the squeak of her neon sneakers pivoting against the concrete, the faint scratch of pen across clipboard. She wasn't retreating. She was cataloging me, marking a fresh violation, building her case. Flared. I cracked the door an inch, chain taut, and there she stood. Neon jogging top blazing in the first smear of sunrise, clipboard hugged to her chest, smile smug enough to make my teeth ache. Behind her, every door on the block bore a new scarlet tag, each one flapping in the morning breeze. The street looked less like suburbia and more like a quarantine zone, and she was the sheriff of contamination. "You know what happens if you don't comply, right?" she said, tilting her head. "Fines, fees, maybe even a lien. People like you think rules don't apply, but they do. I'm here to protect the value of our community." I nearly ripped the chain from its screws. "Protect the value? My wife's asleep inside. This is our home. The only thing toxic here is your ego." Her jaw twitched. She leaned closer until I could smell the peppermint gum popping between her teeth. "Don't test me, Adler. I've got the board's full support. We can enter. We can inspect. We can do whatever's necessary." The lock clicked again, harder this time, metal grinding against metal like a warning growl. My hands curled into fists. "You take one more step and—" She smiled. That smile. The kind that said she thought she'd already won. The sound of that lock rattling against the chain seared into my nerves. Sarah stirred behind me, groggy, half awake. She mumbled, "Who is it?" "The Queen of the HOA, I muttered through clenched teeth. "And she's declared war." Karen tapped her pen against her clipboard, voice suddenly sharp. "Last warning, Adler. Open this door or face daily fines. You'll bleed money before you know it." I laughed, short, humorless, bitter. "You think I'm scared of paper fines? Try crossing this threshold. Just try." Her silence lasted half a heartbeat, then her smirk returned. "You're on notice," she snapped, scribbling furiously. "Every weed in your yard, every crack in your driveway. I'll document it all. You'll wish you'd let me in." The chain quivered as she jerked the key free. Her sneakers squeaked against the porch as she stormed off into the rising dawn. I shut the door, chest heaving, forehead slick with sweat. Sarah sat up in bed, eyes half open. "What happened?" she whispered. I looked back at the trembling chain. "Karen," I said, "and she's not done." But neither was I. Because what she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that the next time she tried that master key, she wouldn't find mold. She'd find me waiting. The quiet after Karen left was worse than the noise. The lock still trembled from her last twist, the chain swayed in its slot, and I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to my own breath. Sarah sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes, not fully grasping what had just happened. "She had a key," I whispered. The words sounded insane even as I said them. "She really had a key." Sarah blinked, confused. "You mean Karen?" "Yes. She tried to open the door at 6 a.m, said it was an emergency inspection for mold." Her laugh was brittle, half asleep. "That's ridiculous." "Ridiculous or not," I muttered. "She'll be back." And right then, fear turned into something sharper. Resolve. I wasn't going to wait for the next key scrape in the dead of night. Karen had declared war, and I wasn't going to fight it with paperwork. By the time the sun burned fully over the rooftops, my house had become a war zone in progress. I dug through closets, rummaged in the garage, pulled down boxes of forgotten gadgets. Every motion camera I owned, cheap Wi-Fi units I'd once used for monitoring packages, was dusted off and reactivated. I mounted one above the front door, another facing the hallway, one hidden behind cookbooks in the kitchen, and even the old baby monitor we'd stuffed in a box years ago. Its screen flickered, red with static, but the lens still worked. Sarah trailed behind me, arms folded, her robe dragging along the floor. "Mark, this is crazy." "Crazy as someone else holding a master key to my house," I snapped, fumbling with duct tape and extension cords. "If she comes back, I want every angle covered. Audio, video, proof. She thinks fear is her weapon? Fine. Let her step into the spotlight." Sarah sighed, but she didn't argue further. Maybe she saw the fire in my eyes, or maybe she knew that deep down this wasn't paranoia. This was survival. I worked feverishly, sweat dripping, heartbeat still hammering. Every trap I set, every wire I taped down, pushed the fear back a little further. When the cameras were ready, I added deterrence. Petty, yes, but satisfying. I filled balloons with food coloring, blue dye mixed into water, and rigged them at the bottom of the door frame. A primitive booby trap, designed not to stop her, but to mark her. If she crossed the threshold again, she'd walk away branded, her sneakers ruined, her pristine leggings splattered. I knew it wouldn't be enough. Karen wasn't the type to back down after humiliation, but I needed her arrogance. I needed her to step inside thinking she still owned the block. That's when I'd catch her. By noon, the house looked ordinary from the outside. Curtains drawn, lawn neatly trimmed, driveway spotless. But inside, it was a fortress disguised as a suburban shell. The cameras blinked silently, their red dots glowing like watchful eyes. Motion alerts fed directly into my phone. Backup cloud storage waited in case Karen tried to seize the devices. Sarah shook her head as I finished rigging the last sensor. "You really think she'll try again?" I looked at her, voice flat. "No, I know she will." The hours crawled. Every jogger's footstep outside made my pulse spike. Every car that slowed near the curb made me tense. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, watching the live feeds glow. The neighborhood was quiet, but not peacefully quiet. It was the silence before a storm. At 5 in the afternoon, Sarah dozed off against the armrest, her breathing steady. I stayed wired, eyes burning from the screens. My phone buzzed every time a motion alert triggered, a passing dog, a kid on a bicycle, the shadows lengthening as the sun dipped. But then, just as the sky turned the color of bruised peaches, I heard it. Footsteps, deliberate, sharp, the kind of strides that don't wander, they march. I leaned forward, thumb trembling as I pulled up the porch feed. And there she was, Karen Blake. In her power-walking glory, clipboard tucked under her arm, ponytail bouncing. She didn't bother with neighbors this time. No friendly facade. She moved with purpose. The feed zoomed in on her hand, a metallic glint, the master key. My throat went dry. My pulse thundered. She glanced left, right, confirming no one was watching. Then she slipped the key into my lock, turned once. The bolt clicked, and she pushed. The chain held, metal rattled, the frame groaned. Karen froze. Shock rippled across her smug face. She'd expected a clean entry. Instead, resistance. Then came the hiss. Pop! The balloon trap burst, splattering her sneakers and leggings in a wave of blue dye. She gasped, stumbling back, looking down in horror as the stain spread like ink across snow. For the first time, the queen of the HOA didn't look regal. She looked like a kid caught red-handed. I bit my tongue to stop myself from laughing. The urge to fling the door open and gloat was nearly unbearable. But no, patience. Let her hang herself. Karen cursed, wiping furiously at her legs with the edge of her clipboard. The camera caught every second, her panic, her fury, the blue streaks glowing under the porch light. Then, instead of retreating, she did exactly what I hoped she would. She doubled down. She pulled out her phone. "Yes, this is Blake," she snapped. "Posse, hang across my porch. I need authorization for forced entry. Yes, it's urgent. Mold risk. I don't care if he resists. We have authority." My jaw clenched. She wasn't bluffing anymore. She was escalating. Inside, Sarah stirred awake, her voice groggy. "What's happening?" I showed her the phone screen. The feed displayed Karen, pacing like a general regrouping after a skirmish, barking orders into her phone, sneakers dripping dye. She's calling for backup, I whispered. And she thinks she still owns us. Sarah's eyes widened. What do we do? I didn't look away from the feed. We let her come. The more she pushes, the deeper she sinks. Karen stopped pacing, phone still to her ear, face twisted with determination. Her voice carried through the porch mic, sharp and merciless. Send the board. Tonight. We're going in. The sky had just slipped into darkness when the headlights came. Two sharp beams cutting down the cul-de-sac, crawling slow like predators, searching for prey. I was already on the couch, phone in hand, watching Karen pace on the feed. She stopped mid-sentence when the SUV rolled to a halt in front of my house. Its hood gleamed like polished armor, chrome reflecting the faint porch light. Out stepped two men in matching polo shirts, clipboards tucked under their arms like they were carrying holy scripture. Behind them, Brenda, the HOA treasurer, tight pearls glinting, lips pursed into a permanent scowl. And of course Karen herself, sneakers still stained blue from the dye, fury glowing under the street lamp. I muttered under my breath, "Here comes the cavalry." Sarah leaned beside me, robe pulled tight, whispering, "Mark, what are we going to do?" I didn't blink. My eyes stayed locked on the feed. We let them bury themselves. The four of them marched to my porch like a firing squad. Their shadows stretched long across the driveway, merging into a black stain against my door. The camera mic caught the scrape of clipboard paper, the faint wheeze of Brenda's voice as she cleared her throat. "Mr. Adler," she announced, her tone dripping with fake authority, "you are hereby in violation of Section 3B, Paragraph 2. You've obstructed an immediate health inspection. If you do not open this door, fines will escalate daily. Further board action will follow." Her voice trembled, but her words were rehearsed, like a sermon she'd delivered too many times. I stayed silent. Silence was gasoline on their fire. Karen stepped forward, face flushed red. "Adler, don't play games. You resisted this morning and you're resisting now. If you open the door, we'll keep this off record. If you don't..." I leaned close to the chain, low enough that only the porch mic picked up my words. "You've got no right to enter. Not without a warrant." The word hit them like a slap. Brenda stiffened. One of the men shifted uneasily, tapping his pen against his clipboard. But Karen... oh no, Karen didn't flinch. She doubled down, slamming the master key into my lock again. The chain screeched as the frame bent under pressure. "Mark Adler!" she shouted, voice rising high enough to wake the block. "You are obstructing an emergency. By the authority of the HOA, we are entering this property." My phone buzzed. Green lights flickered as every camera recorded, feeding footage to the cloud. I raised my voice just enough for the microphones to capture. "You break this door, you're committing criminal trespass. I've got you on video from every angle. Say hi to the judge." For a moment, the porch fell silent. The chain rattled in the lock, Karen's knuckles white as she twisted. Then, crack. One screw popped free from the doorframe, the chain lurching an inch forward. Another shove, and they'd be inside. Sarah gasped behind me, hand flying to her mouth. My pulse thundered so loud I thought it might shake the walls. Karen sneered, lips curling into a grin of triumph. She twisted hard. "Dare." The chain groaned, wood splintering. And that's when the sirens hit. Red and blue lights flooded the street like a tidal wave. Two police cruisers roared around the corner, tires screeching as they cut across the curb and boxed in the SUV. Doors slammed, boots pounded, and suddenly my porch became a crime scene under a strobe of flashing light. "Step away from the door, now!" An officer's voice boomed, sharp and commanding. Karen froze, key still wedged in my lock. The clipboard men raised their hands instinctively, like schoolboys caught cheating. Brenda gasped, clutching her pearls as if they could protect her. The chain rattled one last time before Karen's grip faltered. She stumbled back, sneakers squeaking against the wood, her face pale in the harsh wash of police lights. Inside, I finally exhaled. Sarah's grip tightened on my arm. Relief and vindication surged in my chest. But I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't over. The officers stormed up the walkway, holsters at their sides, flashlights cutting through the chaos. One pointed directly at Karen's hand, where the master key still glinted under the light. "Ma'am," he barked, "you want to explain why you're forcing entry into a private residence at 8 p.m.? Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The HOA queen, always so quick with bylaws and threats, stood speechless under the spotlight. Her entourage shuffled behind her, clipboards now nothing more than props in a play gone horribly wrong. Sarah whispered in my ear, "They caught her red-handed." I whispered back, "No, they caught her blue-footed." On the feed, the cameras zoomed in, capturing every frame. Karen's dye-stained shoes, her trembling hands, her failed smile. Evidence so clear it practically screamed. The younger officer glanced at the key still stuck in my door. He turned his head slowly, eyes narrowing. "This is trespass," he said flatly. The older cop stepped forward, weathered face carved in sneering. 1. "Ma'am, you do not have authority to enter a residence without consent or a warrant. I don't care what your HOA bylaws say." Karen's voice finally cracked free, shrill and desperate. "You don't understand! He signed the agreement! Section 3, paragraph B." "No," the cop cut her off, cold and sharp. "Not at night, not with a key, not like this." From across the street, porch lights flicked on, curtains shifted. Neighbors peeked out, whispering. The entire block was watching now. Karen's face twitched, her perfect mask crumbling. She tried to stand tall, tried to summon the smugness that had carried her through years of petty tyranny. But the lights betrayed her, dye stains glowing, hands trembling, authority shattered. I leaned close to the chain again, voice calm, measured. "Officers, I've got every second on video, multiple angles, time stamped. Would you like to come inside and review?" The younger cop nodded. "We'll need to see that footage." I unlatched the chain, pulling the door open just enough to let them step in. Their radios crackled as they entered, firm and steady, leaving Karen stranded on the porch like a dethroned monarch caught in the act. Her smile flickered one last time, weak, broken, before fading entirely. And in that silence, sweeter than any victory speech, the queen of the HOA stood powerless. The porch wasn't a porch anymore. It was a stage. And Karen Blake, queen of the HOA, wielder of red tags, breaker of chains, was standing dead center in the spotlight, stripped of her crown. The officers moved fast. One grabbed her wrist, the other herded the clipboard men back toward the curb. Brenda, trembling, clutched her pearls so tight I thought the string might snap. Behind them, neighbors gathered like moths to a flame. Porch lights flicked on one after another, illuminating a block that had once bowed quietly under Karen's rule. Now, every window, every curtain crack, every tilted head was watching her fall. I opened the door wider, chain dangling broken, and let the cameras catch me in frame. Calm, steady, victorious. "Officers," I said, my voice cutting through the buzz. "These people attempted forced entry with a master key. It's all on video, multiple angles, time-stamped." The younger cop, tall with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, nodded without hesitation. "We'll need to review that footage." The older one, grizzled, eyes like steel, kept his gaze locked on Karen. "Ma'am, you understand this is trespassing, right? Doesn't matter what your HOA says, you can't force your way into someone's home." Karen's mask cracked fully then. Her voice wobbled, shrill with desperation. "You don't understand. I had authority. The board agreed." "No," the officer cut her off. flat and cold. Not at night, not with a key, not without a warrant. Gasps rippled across the gathering crowd. From the edge of my lawn, Trent, the neighbor who'd spent years swallowing her fines with clenched teeth, grinned wide enough to show it all. "Finally," he muttered loud enough for the whole block to hear, "someone stood up to her." A chorus of whispers followed, building like a wave. She tried to break in. Caught red-handed. With a key? Karen heard them. Every word was a hammer chipping at the throne she'd built from clipboards and bylaws. She tried to plaster on her smile again, but under the glow of red and blue lights, it looked warped. Weak. Inside, Sarah came to stand at my side, her hand finding mine. For the first time that day, her voice was steady. "They see it now. They all see her." I nodded, but didn't let myself relax. Not yet. Because Karen wasn't the kind of tyrant who crumbled in silence. She'd thrash all the way down. The younger cop stepped into my living room, flashlight scanning quickly. "Where's the video?" I had it cued. With a swipe, I pulled up the feed on my phone. The moment Karen slid the key into my lock, the chain straining, the balloon bursting, dye splattering her sneakers. Then the shove, the crack of the frame, her face twisted with rage. The cop's brows lifted. "That's clear as day." The older one leaned in, his jaw tightening as the footage replayed. "Airtight. You've got her nailed." Out on the porch, Karen tried again, her voice breaking under the weight of panic. "This is a misunderstanding. I was protecting the neighborhood." The officer cut her off once more. "No, ma'am. You were breaking and entering. Period." The words hit her harder than any fine she'd ever written. She reeled back, stumbling slightly, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Brenda muttered something about protocol, but her voice was drowned under the crowd's rising buzz. The men with clipboards shifted uneasily, their once proud postures crumpling into something small. The neighborhood had turned. Curtains opened wider. Phones appeared in hands. A dozen tiny screens captured Karen's humiliation under the sirens, the dye, the cops. She wasn't the sheriff of suburbia anymore. She was a spectacle. Trent chuckled again, louder this time. "She could have done that to any of us." A woman across the street shouted, "We're not your subjects, Karen!" The voices grew bolder, sharper. What had been whispers now cut the night like knives. "Vote her out!" someone yelled. The chant spread, rolling through the cul-de-sac like thunder. "Vote her out! Vote her out!" Karen's face twitched, eyes darting desperately to her board members for support. But Brenda stared at the ground. The men with clipboards refused to meet her eyes. Even her so-called allies were abandoning ship. The cops tightened their stance. "Ma'am, step back. You'll be contacted for a formal statement. Until then, you're not to attempt entry into this residence again. Do you understand?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she didn't argue. She just nodded, jaw tight, eyes burning with a fury that promised she wasn't finished. The SUV door slammed. The engine coughed to life. Slowly, reluctantly, the board retreated. The police lights dimmed. One cruiser rolled away. The second lingered, an officer giving me a nod that felt like something more than protocol. It felt like recognition. Then the last car left. Silence fell. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of something new. The neighborhood had seen their queen stripped bare, and they weren't afraid of her anymore. Sarah exhaled, finally releasing my hand. "Is it over?" she asked softly. I looked down at the dye-stained footprints trailing off my porch, glowing faintly under the street lamp. I shook my head. "No, it's just beginning." Because Karen Blake didn't quit. She'd regroup, reframe, spin the story until her clipboard army believed her again. And sure enough, by morning, a new notice landed in my mailbox. Special emergency HOA meeting, attendance required. The fluorescent lights in the community center buzzed like angry wasps. Folding chairs scraped against linoleum as neighbors packed in tighter than I'd ever seen. Usually, HOA meetings drew a dozen people at best, half bored, half unwilling. Tonight, every seat was full. People stood shoulder to shoulder along the back wall, arms crossed, murmurs rising in a low, restless hum. The notice had said, Special Emergency HOA Meeting. But everyone knew the truth. This wasn't a meeting. It was a trial. At the front, a folding table served as the board's throne. Karen Blake sat dead center, papers fanned in front of her like weapons. Her sneakers had been scrubbed raw, but faint blue streaks still stained the laces, a ghost of the dye she couldn't erase. Her hair was pulled back tighter than ever, her smile stretched so thin it looked painful. Brenda sat stiff on her left, pearls glinting under the harsh light. The clipboard men flanked her right, eyes glued to their paperwork, like if they didn't look up, the crowd might forget they were there. Karen tapped the microphone. The squeal of feedback sliced through the chatter, forcing silence. "Good evening, everyone," she began, voice syrupy, rehearsed. "I know there's been confusion about recent events. But let me assure you, the board's actions have always been guided by one principle: the safety and value of our community." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Karen pressed on, eyes scanning for allies. The situation at Mr. Adler's residence was a regrettable misunderstanding. Protocol may have been misinterpreted, but our intentions were pure. We only sought to protect against potential health hazards. Laughter erupted from the back, a harsh, cutting sound. Trent stood, arms folded, his voice carrying. "Health hazards? You tried to break into his house with a master key." The room buzzed. Whispers turned to voices, voices to shouts. Karen gripped the mic tighter, knuckles white. "That's a gross exaggeration." "No exaggeration," a woman near the front snapped. "You slapped a violation on my door because my lawn gnome had a chipped paint spot. Don't talk to us about health hazards." Laughter again, sharper this time. The room smelled blood. Karen banged a gavel, the wood splintering faintly under her grip. "Order! I will not tolerate disorder." But the chant began anyway, from the back first, then rolling forward like thunder. "Vote her out! Vote her out! Vote her out!" Karen's eyes darted wildly, seeking Brenda, the clipboard men, anyone who'd back her. But Brenda's lips pressed tighter, face pale. The men shifted in their seats, avoiding her gaze, pretending to study their papers. The chant grew louder. "Vote her out! Vote her out!" Karen slammed the gavel again, voice cracking. "Enough! You don't understand what leadership requires. Without strict enforcement, this neighborhood will collapse. Property values will plummet. Crime will rise. I've sacrificed to protect you." Her words fell flat. I stood slowly, and the room shifted. Heads turned. Whispers cut short. All eyes locked on me. "Sacrifice?" I said, my voice carrying without a microphone. "Last week you tried to force your way into my home. I have the video, multiple angles, time-stamped. The police have copies." Gasps spread like wildfire. Karen's face flushed crimson, her smile disintegrating. "That's taken out of context," she stammered. "No context excuses criminal trespass," I shot back. "Here's the footage." I held up my phone. The screen glowed, replaying the moment. The key sliding into my lock, the chain straining, the dye bursting across her sneakers. Karen's face frozen in fury. The crowd erupted. Laughter, outrage, shouts of disgust. "She could have done that to any of us!" someone yelled. "We're not your subjects, Karen!" another shouted. The chant roared back, louder than before. "Vote her out! Vote her out!" Karen slammed her gavel so hard it split against the table, wood snapping like a bone. "Stop this!" she screamed, voice breaking. "You people don't understand. You think you want freedom, but without rules, this neighborhood will rot." Her voice cracked again, high and ragged. The queen of the HOA didn't sound like royalty anymore. She sounded desperate. One by one, neighbors rose, listing their grievances. A young mother stood, fury trembling in her voice as she described being fined for leaving a stroller on her porch. A veteran spoke about being cited for his flagpole, an inch too tall. An elderly woman described Karen knocking on her door at midnight over a porch light bulb. Each story was another nail in her coffin. Karen's face collapsed. Her eyes darted, searching for escape, but the room had turned against her completely. Even Brenda shifted uncomfortably, muttering something about reconsidering leadership. Finally, the motion came from the back. "Vote her out," someone declared officially this time. "Effective immediately." Hands shot up across the room, a sea of fists. Karen's face drained of color. She rose, trembling, the microphone squealing as she shouted, "You can't do this! I am the president! You signed the bylaws! You owe me respect!" But no one bowed. No one bent. The chant drowned her. "Vote her out! Vote her out!" For the first time, Karen Blake looked small. Shoulders hunched, eyes wide, the crown slipping completely. But then she snapped. Her voice cut sharp through the chant, ragged and venomous. "Fine. Vote me out, but you'll regret it. Every one of you. You think you're safe without me? You're not. You'll see what happens when the rules crumble." Her chair screeched as she shoved it back, storming from the table, clipboard clutched like a weapon. The doors banged wide as she fled into the night, her sneakers squeaking across linoleum, the faint trace of blue dye still marking her fall from power. The chant followed her out the door, echoing through the community center long after she was gone. The room slowly quieted. People turned to me, some clapping, some nodding. For the first time, the neighborhood didn't look afraid. They looked free. Sarah squeezed my hand. "It's over," she whispered. But I didn't smile, because deep down, I knew Karen. For people like her, humiliation wasn't an ending. It was a fuse. And somewhere out there in the night, that fuse had just been lit. For 3 nights after the meeting, the neighborhood felt lighter. Lawns went unmeasured. Porch lights stayed on past 10, and for once no one feared a clipboard appearing at their door. The streets almost breathed again. Kids biked circles till dusk without parents calling them in. People lingered on porches, laughing like they'd been holding their breath for years. But it was too quiet. I knew Karen Blake better than most. She wasn't built to disappear. Humiliation doesn't kill people like her. It hardens them. And sure enough, by the 4th morning, the first sign came. It arrived folded in half, stuffed in my mailbox like a snake waiting to strike. Notice of violation stamped in red ink. The reason? Improper shrub height. I held it up to Sarah, who was sipping coffee at the kitchen counter. She frowned. "Your shrubs are... what? 2 feet tall?" "Exactly," I muttered, flipping the page. At the bottom, in neat block letters, "Rectify within 72 hours or face escalating fines." Sarah shook her head. "She's starting again." That afternoon, more whispers spread. Trent waved me over across the street holding his own letter. "Violation," he said. "They're calling my barbecue grill a safety hazard." From down the block, a woman held up her envelope, voice shaking with laughter and rage. "They fined me for unauthorized porch seating. It's a rocking chair." Within hours, half the street had red-stamped letters. Every petty rule Karen had once wielded was back, Multiplied, twisted, sharpened. It wasn't just enforcement. It was revenge. By day 5, the mailboxes couldn't keep up. Stacks of paper slid under doors, taped to garage handles, even pinned to car windshields. Each letter carried her signature at the bottom, bold and taunting. President Emeritus, HOA. I stormed into Trent's yard, fists full of paper. She's not even president anymore. How the hell is she still issuing violations? Trent snorted bitterly. Because she's weaponized bureaucracy. Half the board's too spineless to stop her. And Brenda? She's pretending this is just a transitional period. Sarah crossed her arms. So she's out, but still pulling strings. The next morning, the letters changed tone. No more violations. These had thick envelopes, cream-colored with embossed seals, from the office of Blake Harrington Attorneys at Law. Inside, threats, legal jargon, warnings of liens, property seizures, even lawsuits. Entire pages of fine print, signed to terrify. Sarah slammed one on the table. She's trying to scare people into leaving, force sales, bankrupt fines. She's using the system itself as a weapon. I looked around the room, the walls suddenly closing in. She wasn't just coming after lawns anymore. She was coming after lives. The neighborhood cracked. People who once stood together at the meeting now whispered in fear. Porch lights dimmed early. Strollers vanished indoors. Curtains stayed drawn. Nobody wanted to be the next target. Karen had turned the block into her battlefield, and paper was her ammunition. But then came the moment she pushed too far. It was late evening. I stepped outside to take out the trash and froze. Taped to my front door in bold red, "Final notice." Beneath it, a line that made my chest tighten. Pending escalation to foreclosure proceedings. My jaw clenched. She's not just threatening, she's declaring war. Sarah appeared behind me, reading over my shoulder. Her voice cracked. She can't do this, can she? She'll try, I whispered. And that's the danger. The next day, neighbors gathered in Trent's garage. It smelled of gasoline and dust, but it was the only place safe from prying eyes. Stacks of violation letters lay scattered across the workbench, everyone clutching their own pile. This is harassment, the young mother said, her voice trembling. I can't sleep. Every morning I wake up wondering what's waiting in my mailbox. The veteran slammed a letter down. She hit me with 4 in 1 week. 4! I fought overseas, and now I'm battling lawn citations. Trent leaned against his tool cabinet, arms crossed. We need a counterstrike. I nodded. But not with shouting this time. She's hidden behind paper. We'll need to fight her with evidence, not just anger. The room fell silent, everyone looking at me. And in that moment, I realized Karen hadn't just declared war on me. She'd declared war on all of us. That night, the neighborhood was quiet again. Too quiet. I sat at the window, watching the street lamp flicker when I heard the crunch of footsteps on gravel. A shadow crossed my yard. At first, I thought it was a late jogger, but the figure stopped near my driveway, stooping low. Something metallic gleamed in the pale light. My pulse spiked. I pushed the curtain aside just enough to see Karen. She was crouched near my mailbox, hands working with something small and deliberate. Not papers this time. Not envelopes. A lock. She was installing her own padlock on my mailbox. My chest tightened, breath shallow. She glanced over her shoulder, her face half-lit, eyes glinting with a manic fire. Then, as if satisfied, she straightened, patted the metal door, and vanished back into the shadows. I didn't move for a full minute, staring at the padlock gleaming under the streetlight. This wasn't about violations anymore. Karen wasn't just sending messages, she was claiming territory. And something told me this was only the beginning. The padlock on my mailbox stayed there like a scar. Every morning, it gleamed in the sun, a silent reminder that Karen Blake still had her claws in this neighborhood. By noon, 3 more neighbors reported the same thing. Heavy brass padlocks, all keyed the same. Karen had turned public mailboxes into her private vaults. Trent stormed across the street, yanking at the lock on his with both hands. "This is federal property! She can't just—" The lock clanged, unmoved. He threw his arms up. "She thinks she owns the U.S. Postal Service now?" People laughed nervously, but the sound died quick. It wasn't funny. It was invasion. That night, I checked my cameras. At first, just the usual recordings. A stray cat, headlights passing. Then at 2:14 a.m., the feed glitched. Static. When it returned, one of my cameras had been tilted down, staring at the grass. Sarah leaned in. "Did the wind do that?" "Wind doesn't unscrew brackets," I muttered. 2 minutes later, another feed fizzed out. Then another. By dawn, half my surveillance was blind. Neighbors started whispering about strange sounds, clicks at windows, doorknobs rattling at odd hours. Sometimes it was just footsteps crunching on gravel with no one in sight. The young mother called me close to tears. "I heard humming last night. Not outside, inside. Like someone walked through the hall and hummed to themselves. My baby woke up screaming." Trent shook his head. "I heard whistling, 2 in the morning, same tune over and over. When I opened the door, nothing." Karen wasn't sending letters anymore. She was crawling under people's skin. By the 3rd night, paranoia gripped the block. Curtains stayed drawn even in daylight. People taped over their smart doorbells. A few even unplugged Wi-Fi routers, afraid Karen had found a way in. Sarah sat with me at the kitchen table, fingers tight around a mug of tea. "She's breaking them, one by one. Nobody's sleeping. Nobody's laughing anymore." I nodded slowly. "That's the plan. Not to win, just to exhaust us until we give in." I couldn't let that happen. So I set a trap. Not like the dye balloon. This time it was quieter, meaner. I rewired one of my dead cameras, left it dangling, looking broken. Inside, a hidden lens waited. Hours dragged. Midnight. 1. Then, movement. Karen's shape drifted into frame. She didn't rush, didn't sneak. She moved like she belonged there. Calm. Methodical. She reached up, adjusted the broken camera, tilting it further down. Then she smiled, right into the hidden lens. Sarah gasped behind me. "She knows," I whispered. "She wanted us to see." The next morning, envelopes returned. But these weren't letters. They were photos. Photos of us. One showed Sarah carrying groceries. Another showed me kneeling in the garden. One neighbor unfolded an envelope and nearly fainted. Inside was a picture of her daughter on a swing set. The block buzzed with terror. Parents clutched kids close. Trent's jaw shook with rage. "She's spying on us, everywhere. Any second we're outside, she's watching." I gritted my teeth. "She's not just invading our yards anymore. She's crawling into our lives." By evening, fear turned to fury. We gathered again in Trent's garage, sweat dripping under the single bulb overhead. The photos lay spread across the workbench, like evidence from a crime scene. "This isn't HOA business," the veteran growled. "This is stalking. This is psychological warfare." The young mother's voice cracked. "We can't live like this. We can't even let our kids play outside." Trent slammed a fist down. "We need to take action, before she drives someone off this block for good." All eyes landed on me again. I exhaled slowly. If she wants war, we fight it her way. We collect proof. We document everything. And then we hit her where it hurts most. Exposure. But Karen was always one step ahead. That same night, a new sound pierced the block. Not humming, not footsteps. Laughter. It drifted through the dark, low, and sharp, bouncing from yard to yard like a taunt. Sarah clutched my arm. "Tell me you hear that." "I hear it," I whispered. My throat felt dry. The laughter grew louder, closer. Then, silence. A beat later, every porch light on the block flickered off. One by one, total darkness swallowed the street. Heart pounding, I rushed to the breaker box. Every switch was still on. The power hadn't failed. Someone had cut the line. Trent's shout rang out from across the street. "She killed the grid!" Panic erupted, voices calling, children crying, flashlights stabbing through black. And in that suffocating dark, a glow appeared. At the end of the block, Karen's house lit up. Every bulb, every lamp, blazing bright like a beacon. She was the only one with power, and she wanted us to see. The block looked like a ghost town the morning after the blackout. Windows stayed sealed, curtains pulled tight. Neighbors shuffled out only to check if power had returned, then vanished back inside like prey hiding from a predator. Karen's house still blazed. Every bulb burning, curtains wide open, as if she wanted to rub it in. She controlled the dark. She controlled the light. Sarah muttered under her breath, staring from our window. "It's a message. She's saying we live on her terms." I clenched my jaw. Not anymore. That evening we gathered again, more neighbors than before. Even the quiet ones, the ones who used to shrug off Karen's antics, showed up. Faces pale, tired, determined. Trent's garage felt like a war council. The veteran leaned over a rough sketch of the street spread on the table, marking houses with red pen. "She's cutting lines. That means she's sneaking onto property at night, which means trespassing, which means we can nail her." "But how?" the young mother whispered. "She sees everything before we do." I stepped forward. "Not if we bait her." We laid the plan. Hidden motion sensors, backup cameras tucked in birdhouses, decoy lights rigged with tripwires. Sarah suggested something sharper. "She thinks fear keeps us quiet, so let's be loud." Trent frowned. "Loud?" She nodded, eyes burning. "Floodlights, alarms. The second she steps onto someone's yard, we light her up like a stage." The garage buzzed with approval. For the first time in weeks, hope sparked. The trap was set that night. I stayed up, watching the monitors. Midnight passed. 1, 2, silence stretched thin. Then, a chime. Sensor tripped. Camera 3 blinked alive. There she was, Karen Blake, gliding across Trent's driveway, bolt cutters in hand. Her face calm, almost serene, like she was pruning roses instead of slicing through wires. "Got you," I whispered. Tren. It flipped the switch. Floodlights erupted. Sirens wailed. The entire block lit up in blinding white. Karen froze, caught mid-step, every eye on the street snapping open. Doors banged as neighbors poured out, phones in hand, recording. For once, Karen wasn't the hunter. She was the rat in the spotlight. But she didn't run. She smiled. A slow, terrifying smile. Then she raised the bolt cutters high and snapped them closed on Trent's main line. Sparks showered. The sirens hiccuped, died. Half the floodlights went black. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Trent shouted, charging forward. "That's enough!" Karen dropped the cutters and slipped backward into the shadows like smoke. By the time flashlights swept across the yard, she was gone. The videos hit the neighborhood forum before sunrise. Clips of Karen cutting wires, sirens blaring, her face lit like a villain under stage lights. Comments flooded in. Some neighbors furious, others terrified. She won't stop. She's escalating. What if she cuts gas lines next? The paranoia spread faster than proof. By the next day, retaliation came. Envelopes again. This time, not photos, not letters. Inside each was a single object, a key. Old, rusted, mismatched keys. Dozens of them. The young mother screamed when she opened hers. She's saying she can get in. Any lock, any door, she has the keys. Trent hurled his into the street, swearing. Sarah's voice shook. It's not about whether they fit, it's the threat. She wants us lying awake, wondering if tonight is the night she tries them. We doubled our patrols, groups of neighbors walking the block, flashlights sweeping, dogs barking. But even that felt hollow. Karen never appeared when we expected, only when she wanted. The veteran pulled me aside one night. His voice was gravel. This isn't just harassment anymore. This is insurgency. And the only way to beat insurgency, expose the leader. I nodded. So we keep recording. Every step, every move. We drown her in her own evidence. But Karen wasn't just playing defense. On the fourth night, as patrols circled, a crash split the quiet. Glass shattering. We sprinted toward the sound. Trent's house. His front window caved in, shards glittering across the porch. Inside, his wife clutched their kids, screaming. On the living room wall, spray paint dripped in jagged red letters. Get out! Trent's roar shook the night. She's threatening my family now! Neighbors crowded around, filming, shouting, panic boiling into fury. And then, another crash. The young mother's house. A back window shattered. We spun just in time to see a figure vanish into the dark. Flashlights fanned out, beams slicing across yards. My chest hammered. Karen was no longer playing games. She was breaking into homes. And the neighborhood, once bound by fear, now stood trembling at the edge of violence. Sarah's whisper cut through the chaos, sharp and certain. She won't stop until someone makes her. The street went silent at that thought. Every face turned, knowing the truth. This wasn't an HOA dispute anymore. It was war. The neighborhood woke with bloodshot eyes and jittering nerves. By dawn, broken glass still glittered on Trent's lawn, the red spray paint screaming from his wall like an open wound. Nobody went to work that morning. Nobody sent their kids to school. Instead, we gathered. Every house, every family. It wasn't a block meeting anymore. It was a siege council. Trent stood at the center, fists balled, voice ragged. She broke into my home, threatened my kids. This isn't debate material anymore. We end this. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, fear clashing with anger. She's crazy, Trent. What if she has a weapon? What if she's armed? What if she snaps and burns us all out? Sarah cut them off, her voice slicing clean. What if we keep doing nothing? She already owns our 9. Gates, how long before she owns our days too? Silence swallowed the street. I spoke next, heart pounding loud enough I swore Karen could hear it from her window. We can't match her paranoia with more paranoia. We need proof. Overwhelming, undeniable. We catch her red-handed. Not just one video. We flood the cops, the board, the courts with so much evidence they can't ignore us. Trent slammed the table. Fine, then we catch her tonight. Preparations began like a military operation. Garage doors yawned open. Extension cords stretched across driveways. Motion lights tested again and again. Sarah and the young mother printed flyers. Neighborhood watch active. Trespassers will be prosecuted. And plastered them across fences. For the first time in months, fear looked like unity. But Karen was watching. From her porch, she sipped coffee, gaze gliding over our frenzy like a queen amused by peasants. No smirk, no taunt, no words, just silence. That silence felt worse than the threats. Dusk fell heavy. Flashlights clicked on. Walkie-talkies buzzed in palms. Patrols split into pairs, circling like sentries around a fortress. I took Sarah's hand. If this goes wrong, she squeezed tight. Then at least we stood up. Hours bled by. Midnight, 1, 2. The air felt thick, electric, waiting for a storm. Then, ping, sensor 4, backyard of the young mother's house. We froze. Camera feed crackled alive on Trent's monitor. There she was, Karen, hood drawn low, gloves flashing silver, crawling through the grass with a crowbar. The block held its breath. Now? Trent whispered. Wait, I said, voice shaking. Let her step inside. Let her cross the line. On screen, Karen rose, slid the crowbar under a window frame, pushed. Glass popped. Frame cracked. She slipped one leg inside. Now! Floodlights detonated. Sirens screamed. We surged out of hiding, 30 neighbors at once, flashlights blazing like search beams. Phones lifted, camera, S rolling, voices shouting, Caught you! Stay right there! Police are on the way! For the first time, Karen faltered. Her head jerked left, right. No shadows to run to, no silence to melt into. Just a wall of neighbors, phones out, evidence locking her in. But then she laughed. A dry, cutting laugh that turned stomachs cold. She raised the crowbar high, not at the window, not at the house, at us. And with a wild grin, she hurled it. The steel bar clanged against pavement inches from a child's feet. Screams erupted, parents yanking kids back, chaos unraveling. Karen bolted. Trent sprinted first. After her! The crowd surged, flashlights bouncing, dogs barking, voices echoing through the night. Karen tore down the street, her pale face lit in bursts by headlights and porch lamps. Neighbors chased, recording, shouting, stumbling. For a moment, it felt like we could finally pin her down. But Karen knew the block better than anyone. She cut sharp through hedges, slipped down side yards, vaulted fences with a speed that defied her age. By the time we rounded the corner, she was gone. Breathless, furious, neighbors collapsed onto lawns, shouting, panicking. She could have hit that kid! She's out of control! This is attempted assault, attempted murder. Sarah's voice cracked above the chaos. No one sleeps tonight, not until she's in cuffs. Back in Trent's garage, footage replayed on loop. Karen's face, clear as daylight, the crowbar gleaming mid-air, her laugh echoing like poison. We emailed everything, police, HOA board, even local news tips. But replies crawled in sluggish. We'll review. We'll escalate. We'll follow up. Not tonight. Not now. Trent slammed the laptop shut. They don't care. They never care until someone's dead. The block sat in silence, fear gnawing. Then a noise. A steady tap, 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 against the garage door. We froze. Trent motioned for quiet, edging closer. The tapping grew sharper. With one motion, he yanked the door open. Nothing. Just the night. And at his feet, a single object, rocking gently on the pavement. A lighter. Silver. The initials KB scratched across the side. The crowd gasped. Sarah whispered the words no one wanted to say. She's telling us what's next. The lighter flickered in the streetlight. And suddenly, every house felt flammable. The lighter sat in Trent's palm like a ticking bomb. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was prophecy. Karen had drawn the last card. Fire. By morning, fear became fuel. Neighbors dragged hoses across lawns, tested sprinklers, stacked buckets by porches. Gas cans were locked in sheds, propane tanks chained. Kids were sent away to relatives. Every eye stayed sharp, every hand ready. It didn't feel like a neighborhood anymore. It felt like a battlefield waiting for the first shot. Night fell heavy. No stars, no moon, just clouds, thick and low, pressing down. We gathered again in Trent's garage, screens glowing with camera feeds. Midnight crawled past. 1, 2. Nothing. Then, beep. Sensor 12. My own backyard. The screen lit up. Karen, dressed in black. Gas can in one hand, lighter in the other. And she wasn't creeping anymore. She was striding, bold, like she wanted to be seen. Sarah grabbed my wrist. "Call the cops! They won't get here in time." My voice was ash in my throat. Trent growled. "Then we stop her." We burst from the garage like floodwater. Dozens of us, flashlights flaring, voices shattering the silence. "Karen, drop it!" "It's over!" She froze. Her face turned toward us, eyes wide, almost gleaming. Then she smiled. With one slow motion, she unscrewed the gas can. The sharp stink flooded the night. Neighbors gagged, shouting, panicking. Kids hidden in cars whimpered. She raised the lighter. Trent lunged first. Tackle low like a linebacker. The can tumbled, gasoline splashing across. Grass. The lighter clattered, bounced once, twice, flared alive. Flame kissed the wet ground. Fire roared. Chaos erupted. Screams, buckets flying, hoses blasting. I dove with Sarah, stomping flames, dragging neighbors back. Smoke clawed at our lungs, heat blistering skin. Karen shrieked, not in fear, but in laughter. Maniacal, triumphant. "You'll never get rid of me." Then, sirens. Red and blue lights bled across houses. Engines howled. Doors slammed. Police stormed the block, flashlights cutting the smoke. 2 officers tackled Karen, slamming her to the ground, wrenching her arms behind her back. Even cuffed, she thrashed, spitting curses. "They'll let me out! You think this ends? You think this ends?" Neighbors collapsed on lawns, coughing, crying, clutching each other. The fire hissed under hoses. The smoke thinned. For the first time in months, the night was quiet. Karen was dragged to the squad car, screaming all the way. The door slammed, cutting her voice into silence. We stood in the street, soaked in sweat and ash, staring at each other like survivors of a storm. Trent bent down, picked up the bent lighter, still warm. He held it high. "No more fear," he said. "Not ever again." Days blurred. News vans lined the block, reporters swarming. Suburban nightmare ends in flames. HOA from hell finally arrested. The videos went viral. Karen's face, distorted in rage, played on repeat across channels. The HOA board scrambled, cops launched investigations, restraining orders stacked like sandbags. And slowly, life returned. Kids rode bikes again. Windows stayed open. Sprinklers hissed on lazy afternoons. The block began to heal. But scars remained. Burn marks on grass. Shattered glass in corners no broom could reach. And in our heads, the echo of her laugh. Weeks later, I sat on my porch, Sarah beside me, coffee warm in our hands. The air smelled clean again, but across the street Trent still kept motion lights on all night. Do you think it's really over? Sarah whispered. I stared at the spot where Karen once stood, crowbar in hand, fire in her eyes. I think, I said slowly, it's over for now. Because the truth was, monsters don't vanish. They wait. And sometimes, they live right next door.